Macmillan Audio presents Dead Road by Seth Patrick. Read for you by Ari Fliakos. Chapter 1. The house was old, and it looked it. The man Kendrick was going to see had lived there for almost 5 decades now, isolated in a valley in the north of Arkansas. He owned most of the valley, too. All that wealth was inherited, the kind of sums that tended to push people one way or the other, either in an obsessive quest to enlarge that fortune or towards the indulgences and eccentricities that only the rich could afford. Virgil Drayton had gone the latter route. At 72, the man had the visual appeal of a walking corpse, the product of decades spent avoiding leaving his house. Drayton's eccentricity of choice was paranoia, and it had taken its toll. Kendrick parked up on what had once been an opulent gravel driveway, a ludicrous fountain in the middle that hadn't seen the flow of water in years. Within the fountain was an elaborate raised pool now clogged with weeds. Above the ornate centerpiece, an ugly rusting sculpture was barely holding together. It stood as a reminder of where all that wasted money had come from. Steel. Drayton had explained it to him the first time Kendrick had been here. The sculpture was inspired by the steel skeleton of the vast buildings that had contributed so much to the company his grandfather had created. The artist had intended it to embody the notion of potential, the optimism of the times. Now, red and decayed, it looked more like a jumble of used hypodermic needles or nails loaded with tetanus spores. The gravel of the driveway was a patchwork of invading vegetation. The once lush landscaped gardens had long abandoned any pretense at obedience, and gave the impression of a green army laying siege to the building they'd once been ordered to guard. The building was vast, 3 floors and 80 rooms, but hardly any of it was used now. Kendrick had been shown perhaps a dozen of them by Drayton and his sole companion, a butler. All the rooms had appeared well kept, but with plenty of visible wear and tear. There was an unmistakably musty smell to the place. The one time he'd managed to look around a little more when his hosts had been distracted, he'd found room after room of moldering junk, the infrastructure of the place almost rotting before his eyes. He'd been cautious about where he'd placed his feet, in case the rot had spread to the floor. Drayton, childless and paid help aside, friendless, seemed to have been content for the house to keep pace with his own physical deterioration. His death would be unnoticed and unmourned. The house would die with him. Kendrick wondered if Drayton's butler was implicated in this. Surely some of Drayton's fortune would make its way to him in the end, so why let his master waste large portions of it trying to salvage the old homestead? Assuming, of course, that there was much of the fortune left. Drayton's paranoid fantasies hadn't simply kept him from venturing out into the real world for the last 3 decades. He'd been far more hands-on than that, actively, if remotely, seeking out those he considered experts in the areas that most interested him, and funding them through various indirect means. Drayton claimed to have the most complete library in the world on hidden conspiracies and fringe theories. He didn't denote the subject matter as that, of course. He called it suppressed truth, and referred to his library as the Grail. It didn't seem to matter to Drayton when theories clashed or made no sense at all. He believed every word, however outlandish it seemed, and his obsession was precisely the reason Kendrick had sought him out. The man had money and contacts, and Kendrick needed both. At first, Drayton had denied all knowledge of his involvement. The money and paper trails connecting him to his carefully chosen experts had been very well disguised. The idea that he'd been found...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?